Hey everyone, tonight we're exploring something truly fascinating, the quiet economic heartbeat that pulsed through ancient Egypt's temples for over 3 millennia. Before we settle in together, take a moment to like this if you enjoy these gentle historical journeys, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love discovering how our global community comes together to explore these intricate questions of human organization. Now get comfortable, dim those lights, and let your breathing slow. Tonight we're not chasing dramatic conquests or legendary pharaohs. Instead, we're going to examine something much quieter but equally profound: how Egypt's temples became sophisticated economic institutions that shaped daily life for millions of people across thousands of years. Let's begin our peaceful journey into the sacred landscape of temple economics. Picture, if you will, the first rays of dawn breaking over limestone temple walls along the Nile. In the gentle morning light, priests begin their daily rituals, but these aren't merely spiritual observances. They're opening granaries, checking inventory scrolls, and preparing for another day of economic activity that will touch every corner of Egyptian society. The sound of grinding grain mingles with morning prayers, while scribes already bend over papyrus sheets, recording yesterday's harvests with reed pens that connect earth to administration through their very fibers. Tonight, we'll discover how these temples evolved from simple shrines into complex economic ecosystems that owned vast agricultural estates, collected taxes, operated sophisticated craft workshops, and maintained trade networks stretching from Nubia to the Mediterranean. We'll explore the gentle rhythms of seasonal taxation that followed the Nile's floods, the quiet workshops where sacred objects were crafted alongside commercial goods, and the careful balance between divine service and economic necessity that defined temple life. This is a story of institutional evolution, of how human communities created systems that endured for millennia by weaving together spiritual meaning and practical needs. As we settle into this exploration together, we'll witness the daily contradictions and quiet innovations that made Egypt's temple economy both remarkably stable and surprisingly adaptable to changing times. The first light of dawn touches the limestone walls of Karnak, illuminating hieroglyphic inscriptions that record not divine proclamations, but careful accounts of barley harvests, textile production quotas, and the gentle rhythms of economic life that sustained one of humanity's most enduring civilizations. In these quiet moments before the day's activities begin, we can sense the profound integration of sacred and economic life that characterized ancient Egyptian temple complexes for over 3 millennia. The temple precincts of ancient Egypt were more than centers of worship. They were sophisticated economic ecosystems where the spiritual and material worlds intertwined with remarkable complexity. As morning mist rises from the sacred pools where temple workers performed their ritual ablutions before beginning their daily tasks, we glimpse a world where economic activity was inseparable from religious devotion, where the production of bread and beer held equal importance with the recitation of prayers, and where the careful management of agricultural estates served both divine and human needs. Within the vast enclosure walls of temples like Karnak, which encompassed over 200 hectares of economic activity, a remarkable diversity of productive enterprises flourished. The gentle splash of water in sacred pools mixed with the rhythmic sounds of looms in textile workshops, while the soft scratch of reed pens on papyrus documented the complex transactions that kept these institutions functioning. The shadows cast by massive columns created cool spaces where craftsmen worked metal, wove fabric, and carved stone, their skills passed down through generations of temple miners-associated guilds. The Temple of Ptah at Memphis exemplified this integration of sacred and economic functions, serving as the center of metalworking guilds whose members saw their craft as both practical necessity and religious offering. Here, The rhythmic hammering of bronze and the careful working of precious metals created objects that served temple rituals, while also participating in broader networks of trade exchange. The gentle glow of furnaces heating metals mingled with the incense of religious ceremonies, creating an atmosphere where economic production was elevated to the level of sacred activity. Archaeological evidence from sites like Edfu reveals the extraordinary detail with which temple administrators documented their economic procedures. Inscriptions on temple walls record not only religious rituals, but also the organization of workshops, the allocation of resources, and the seasonal patterns of production that Nile Valley. These records, carved in stone with the same care devoted to religious texts, demonstrate how economic activity was understood as an integral part of maintaining cosmic order. The physical layout of temple complexes reflected this economic integration. Storage facilities for grain, workshops for various crafts, and administrative offices were arranged within the sacred precinct not as secular intrusions, but as essential components of the temple's spiritual mission. The scent of cedar wood being carved for temple furniture mixed with the aroma of bread baking in temple ovens, while the soft rustling of papiers in archives created a soundscape where economic documentation was part of the temple's daily meditation. From the perspective of temple priests, economic administration was not separate from spiritual duties, but rather another form of service to the divine. The careful measurement of grain harvests, the supervision of craft production, and the maintenance of detailed records were understood as religious obligations requiring the same precision and devotion as ritual performances. This integration created a unique form of institutional life where economic efficiency served spiritual purposes and spiritual practices enhanced economic productivity. Local communities experienced temple economics as both opportunity and obligation. The temples provided employment for skilled craftsmen, markets for agricultural produce, and centers of learning where scribal skills were transmitted. Yet these benefits came with responsibilities as communities were expected to contribute labor, materials, and expertise to temple projects. The relationship was neither purely exploitative nor entirely benevolent, but rather a complex negotiation between institutional needs and community resources. Royal officials viewed temple economics with a mixture of support and concern. While temples served important state functions and contributed to overall economic stability, their growing wealth and independence could challenge royal authority. This tension created a dynamic relationship where temples operated with considerable autonomy while remaining integrated into broader patterns of Egyptian administration and governance. The evolution of temple economic systems from simple Creed and Sapphic shrines to the vast complexes of the New Kingdom reflects broader patterns of Egyptian social development. What began as modest offerings to local deities gradually expanded into sophisticated institutions that managed extensive agricultural estates, operated complex craft workshops, and maintained detailed administrative records. This transformation occurred gradually, over centuries invested increasing resources in their religious institutions, and these institutions developed the capacity to manage ever more complex economic activities. The contemplative observer of these ancient systems can appreciate how they addressed fundamental human needs for both material security and spiritual meaning. The temples provided economic stability through diversified production, seasonal storage, and risk management, while simultaneously offering communities a sense of cosmic order and divine protection. This integration of practical and spiritual functions created institutions of remarkable resilience that adapted to changing circumstances while maintaining their essential character across millennia of Egyptian history. The gentle rhythm of agricultural life in ancient Egypt found its most profound expression in the vast temple estates that stretched along the fertile banks of the Nile. As morning mist rose from fields that had been blessed by both river and divine decree, temple administrators began their quiet work of managing agricultural endowments that would sustain religious life for millennia. These sacred lands, granted by pharaohs and accumulated through centuries of pious donations, represented far more than mere property holdings. They embodied the ancient Egyptian understanding that the gods themselves were the ultimate owners of all fertile earth. The concept of divine land ownership created a unique agricultural system where spiritual devotion and economic necessity intertwined, like the twisted fibers of flax. Temple estates during the New Kingdom period controlled an estimated 30% of all cultivated land in Egypt. Their boundaries marked not by simple stone markers, but by elaborate stelae inscribed with religious texts that proclaimed the eternal nature of divine ownership. These holdings stretched across multiple nomes, creating agricultural networks that required sophisticated management systems to coordinate planting, harvesting, and distribution across vast distances. The Will Be Our Papyrus, that remarkable Middle Kingdom document discovered in the archives of a temple administrator, reveals the careful attention paid to every aspect of temple agriculture. Its columns of hieratic script record not just the size of fields, but the names of individual farmers, the quality of soil in different plots, and the complex arrangements by which temple lands were cultivated. Reading these ancient accounts, one can almost hear the gentle conversation between scribe and farmer as they walked field boundaries at dawn, calculating the potential harvest wild as called from near by sycamore trees. The seasonal rhythm of temple agriculture followed the eternal pattern of the Nile's flood, creating a cycle of economic activity that connected earthly labor with cosmic order. During the inundation season, when the river covered the land with its life-giving silt, temple workers focused on maintaining irrigation channels and preparing tools for the coming planting season. The quiet months of flood were times of planning and preparation, when administrators reviewed the previous year's records and made adjustments to cultivation plans based on the height of the flood and the condition of the soil. As the waters receded, revealing field rich with fertile mud, the intensive work of planting began. Temple estates employed both permanent workers and seasonal laborers, creating communities that moved with the agricultural rhythm. The Hekinah archive, those personal papers of a temple land administrator from the Middle Kingdom, provides intimate glimpses into the daily management of these agricultural operations. Hekinah's correspondence reveals an deeply concerned with the practical details of farming, negotiating with workers, arranging for seed grain, worrying about weather conditions while simultaneously maintaining his responsibilities to the temple's religious functions. The harvest season brought the most intensive economic activity to temple estates. Grain was cut with copper sickles, gathered into sheaves, and transported to temple granaries, where it was carefully measured and recorded. The process of measuring grain became a ritual in itself, with standard measures blessed by priests and the act of recording yields accompanied by prayers for continued abundance. Temple granaries, with their thick walls and careful ventilation systems, served as both practical storage facilities and symbols of divine provision, their contents representing the successful collaboration between human labor and divine blessing. The management of temple livestock added another layer of complexity to agricultural operations. Sacred cattle, their horns often decorated with precious metals, grazed in temple pastures while also serving practical economic functions. The daily milking of temple herds, the careful breeding of animals for both sacrifice and agricultural work, and the production of leather and other animal products all required specialized knowledge and careful coordination. Veterinary texts from temple archives reveal the sophisticated understanding of animal husbandry that temple administrators developed, treating their herds as both economic assets and sacred charges. The integration of temple agriculture with broader Egyptian economic systems created opportunities for both cooperation and tension. Temple estates often employed the same irrigation systems used by private farmers, requiring careful negotiation about water rights and maintenance responsibilities. During times of low floods or other agricultural crises, temple administrators found themselves balancing their religious obligations with the practical needs of survival, sometimes opening temple granaries to feed local communities while ensuring sufficient supplies for religious ceremonies. The records of temple agricultural management reveal a sophisticated understanding of sustainable farming practices that sustained Egyptian agriculture for thousands of years. Crop rotation, careful management of soil fertility, and the integration of livestock with grain production all contributed to the long-term productivity of temple estates. These practices, developed through centuries of careful observation and recorded in temple archives, represent one of humanity's earliest experiments in systematic agricultural management, their success measured not just in economic terms, but in the continuity of religious observance they made possible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the temple courtyards as tax collectors prepared for their gentle pilgrimage through the villages of Middle Egypt. These were not the harsh enforcers of later empires, but rather learned scribes who understood that taxation in ancient Egypt flowed, like the Nile itself, predictable, essential, and deeply woven into the fabric of sacred and secular life. The temple's right to collect taxes represented one of the most sophisticated aspects of Egyptian economic organization, a system that balanced divine authority with practical necessity in ways that would influence administrative practices for millennia. The evolution of temple taxation rights emerged gradually from the earliest dynastic periods, when pharaohs began granting specific temples the authority to collect taxes from designated lands on communities. These grants, inscribed on stone stelae and carefully preserved in temple archives, represented more than mere economic privileges. They embodied the fundamental Egyptian belief that the gods themselves owned the land and its produce. The Wilbia Papiers, dating from the reign of Ramesses V, provides an extraordinarily detailed window into this system, documenting tax assessments across multiple temple estates with the precision of a master accountant and the reverence of a religious text. In the quiet hours before dawn, temple scribes would prepare their materials for tax collection journeys, grinding ink from carbonate gum, cutting fresh reed pens, and rolling out papier scrolls that would record the day's collections. The process itself carried a ritualistic quality, as if the very act of documentation connected the earthly realm of grain and silver to the divine realm of eternal order. These scribes understood that their work served dual purposes, ensuring the temple's economic sustainability while maintaining the cosmic balance that kept Egypt prosperous. The integration of temple taxation with royal tax systems created a complex web of obligation that required careful navigation by both collectors and taxpayers. Farmers working temple lands might find themselves subject to multiple tax assessments, payments to the temple for the use of sacred land, contributions to royal granaries for state projects, and local levies for irrigation maintenance. Yet rather than creating conflict, this system often fostered cooperation, as temple administrators worked closely with royal officials to coordinate collection schedules and avoid overwhelming local communities during vulnerable periods. The seasonal rhythm of tax collection followed the ancient patterns of the Nile flood, with major assessments occurring after the harvest when granaries were full and farmers could most easily meet their obligations. Temple tax collectors would arrive in villages during these prosperous times, often accompanied by temple priests, who would bless the harvest and remind the community of their sacred obligations. The sight of tax collectors approaching was not necessarily unwelcome, as these visits often brought news from other regions, opportunities for trade, and the reassurance that the temple's protective influence extended over the community. The methods of tax collection reflected the sophisticated understanding of local conditions that temple administrators had developed over centuries. Rather than demanding fixed amounts regardless of circumstances, temple taxation systems incorporated flexibility based on flood levels, crop yields, and local economic conditions. The HTE archive reveals how temple administrators carefully calculated tax obligations based on actual agricultural output, adjusting assessments to ensure that farmers could meet their obligations without facing destitution. Payment in kind remained the predominant form of temple taxation throughout most of Egyptian history, with grain, livestock, textiles, and crafted goods flowing into temple storehouses in a continuous stream of offerings that blurred the line between religious devotion and official obligation. The temple courtyards would fill with the gentle sounds of measurement and assessment as scribes weighed sacks of barley, counted cattle, and examined the quality of linen cloth. These activities carried their own peaceful rhythm, as if the very act of organizing and cataloging the community's surplus created a sense of order and abundance. The relationship between temple taxation and monetary systems evolved gradually, with silver and gold playing increasingly important roles during the New Kingdom period. Temple treasuries would accumulate precious metals not only from direct taxation, but also from the conversion of goods collected in kind. The soft clink of silver being counted in temple offices became a familiar sound, as administrators balanced the practical needs of maintaining complex institutions with the traditional patterns of agricultural surplus distribution. Foreign merchants and traders found themselves drawn into temple taxation systems through various commercial activities, creating international dimensions to what might otherwise have been purely local arrangements. The great temples of Memphis and Thebes served as centers of international commerce, where foreign goods were assessed and taxed according to complex schedules that reflected both their economic value and their potential religious significance. Frankincense from Punt, cedar wood from Lebanon, and lapis lazuli from distant Afghanistan all passed through temple taxation systems that helped fund the elaborate religious ceremonies that defined Egyptian civilization. The human dimension of temple taxation emerges clearly from surviving records, revealing administrators who struggled to balance competing demands while maintaining the sacred character of their institutions. Temple priests serving as tax collectors often found themselves mediating between the practical needs of their communities and the institutional requirements of their temples, developing flexible approaches that preserved social harmony while ensuring adequate resources for religious activities. These quiet negotiations conducted in temple offices and village meeting places represented the daily reality of economic administration in ancient Egypt. The contradictions inherent in temple taxation systems created ongoing tensions that required constant attention and adjustment. Temples that accumulated too much wealth might face royal intervention, while those that failed to maintain adequate resources risked losing their ability to perform essential religious functions. The balance between economic efficiency and spiritual purpose remained a constant challenge, one that temple administrators approached with the same careful attention they devoted to religious rituals and seasonal celebrations. The gentle rhythm of hammers against metal echoed through the limestone corridors of temple workshops, creating a peaceful percussion that had marked the passing of seasons for countless generations. Within the sacred precincts of Egypt's great temples, craftsmen worked with quiet dedication, their skills serving both divine necessity and economic vitality. These workshops, nestled within temple complexes from Memphis to Edfu, represented one of ancient Egypt's most sophisticated systems of organized production, where spiritual devotion and practical expertise merged in ways that would influence economic organization for millennia. The temple workshops of ancient Egypt emerged from a fundamental understanding that divine service required material excellence. In the cool shadows of temple courtyards, master craftsmen guided apprentices through techniques passed down through generations, their knowledge preserved not merely as trade secrets, but as sacred traditions. The rhythmic sound of looms filled textile workshops where fine linen was woven for priestly garments and temple furnishings, while nearby, metal workers shaped precious metals into ritual vessels and ceremonial objects. The scent of cedar wood mixed with incense as carpenters crafted furniture for temple chambers, their work requiring both technical skill and spiritual understanding. Archaeological evidence from Karnak reveals extensive workshop areas where specialized craftsmen produced everything from jewelry to furniture, their output serving both temple needs and broader commercial purposes. The Temple of Ptah at Memphis became particularly renowned as a center of metalworking guilds, where techniques for working copper, bronze, and precious metals were refined and transmitted. These workshops operated on principles that balanced religious obligation with practical efficiency, creating systems of production that could adapt to changing needs while maintaining consistent quality standards. The organization of temple craft production reflected Egypt's sophisticated understanding of skill specialization and resource management. Master craftsmen held positions of considerable respect within temple hierarchies, their expertise valued alongside that of priests and administrators. Apprenticeship systems ensured the continuity of knowledge, with young workers learning not only technical skills, but also the spiritual significance of their craft. The creation of objects for temple use required understanding of religious symbolism and ritual requirements, making craftsmen active participants in Egypt's spiritual life rather than merely skilled laborers. Temple workshops produced goods that served multiple economic functions within Egyptian society. While primary production focused on items needed for religious ceremonies and temple maintenance, surplus goods entered broader commercial networks. Fine textiles woven in temple workshops found their way to royal courts and wealthy households, while metalwork and jewel were produced by temple craftsmen became prized trade goods. This dual function created economic sustainability for temple operations while contributing to Egypt's broader prosperity. The seasonal rhythms of agricultural life influenced temple craft production in subtle but important ways. During flood seasons, when agricultural work was limited, temple workshops often increased their activity, drawing on labor that might otherwise be underemployed. The timing of major religious festivals created predictable surges in production demand, requiring careful planning and resource allocation. Temple administrators developed sophisticated systems for managing these cyclical patterns, ensuring that both routine temple needs and special ceremonial requirements could be met without disrupting broad economic activities. Evidence from the Deir el-Medina workers' village provides intimate glimpses into how temple craft production integrated with daily life. These royalton workers, while primarily serving pharaonic projects, maintained close connections with temple workshops and often contributed their skills to temple projects during off-minus seasons. Their personal papers reveal a complex web of economic relationships that connected temple craft production with royal projects, private commissions, and local community needs. The economic impact of temple workshops extended far beyond their immediate production. These centers of skilled craftsmanship served as training grounds for techniques that spread throughout Egyptian society, raising overall standards of production and contributing to Egypt's reputation for quality goods in international markets. The concentration of skilled workers within temple complexes created innovative environments where new techniques could be developed and refined, contributing to technological advancement that benefited all sectors of Egyptian society. Temple craft production also created complex relationships between religious and economic authority. While craftsmen served temple needs, their skills made them valuable to royal projects and private patrons. This created potential tensions between competing demands for skilled labor, requiring careful negotiation between temple administrators, royal officials, and craft masters. The resolution of these tensions often involved sophisticated arrangements that allowed craftsmen to serve multiple masters while maintaining their primary temple obligations. The legacy of temple craft production systems influenced Egyptian economic organization for centuries, creating patterns of skill specialization and quality control that persisted even as political circumstances changed. These workshops demonstrated how religious institutions could serve as effective centers of economic organization, combining spiritual motivation with practical efficiency in ways that created lasting prosperity for both temples and the broader communities they served. In the quiet chambers of Temple Scriptura Mess, where morning light filtered through narrow windows carved from limestone blocks, the gentle scratch of reed pens against papyrus created a rhythm as constant as the Nile's flow. Here, in these peaceful spaces that bridge the sacred and administrative worlds, scribes maintain the intuitive record economics possible. The soft rustle of papyrus scrolls being unrolled, the careful preparation of black ink from carbon and gum, and the methodical arrangement of writing implements created an atmosphere of contemplative precision that would define Egyptian administrative culture for millennia. The scribal economy of Egyptian temples represented far more than mere record minus keeping. These institutions served as comprehensive centers of learning where young men learned not only the complex art of hieroglyphic writing, but also the mathematical principles, legal concepts, and administrative procedures that govern temple economic life. In the cool shadows of temple courtyards, apprentice scribes practiced their craft on limestone flakes, their reed pens creating the characters that would eventually document harvests, track taxation, and record the countless transactions that sustained these vast religious communities. The development of temple scribal systems reflected the gradual sophistication of Egyptian civilization itself. During the Old Kingdom, temple scribes maintained relatively simple records of offerings and land grants, their hieroglyphic inscriptions carved directly into stone walls or written on precious papyrus sheets. By the Middle Kingdom, these administrative systems had evolved into complex bureaucracies capable of managing vast estates, coordinating craft production, and maintaining detailed archives that stretched back generations. The Wilbr papyrus, dating to the reign of Ramesses V, provides a remarkable window into this administrative sophistication, documenting temple land holdings across Middle Egypt with meticulous precision. Within Temple Scriptura Mess, the integration of religious and economic documentation created unique challenges and opportunities. Scribes worked by the gentle light of oil lamps, their flames casting dancing shadows across papyrus sheets as they recorded both sacred rituals and mundane transactions. The same hand that copied religious texts might also calculate grain yields, track craft production, or document tax collection. This integration reflected the fundamental Egyptian understanding that economic activity was inseparable from divine order, each transaction representing a small part of maintaining cosmic balance. The administrative hierarchy within temple scribal systems created multiple layers of oversight and expertise. Senior scribes, often priests themselves, supervised the work of junior colleagues while maintaining direct communication with temple administrators and royal officials. These experienced scribes developed specialized knowledge in particular areas, miners, some focusing on agricultural records, others on craft production, still others on taxation and tribute. The HTE archive, discovered at Darel minus Bahiri, reveals how one temple administrator managed complex economic relationships across multiple villages, balancing agricultural production with religious obligations through careful record minus keeping and strategic planning. The physical organization of temple archives reflected the importance of preserving economic records for future reference. Papyrus scrolls were carefully stored in wooden boxes or ceramic jars, their contents cataloged in cross-minus reference to ensure easy retrieval. The soft whisper of papyrus being unrolled in these archive chambers accompanied the daily work of scribes who consulted previous records to verify land boundaries, confirm tax obligations, or track the performance of temple estates over time. This institutional memory allowed temples to maintain economic continuity across generations of administrators and political changes The training of temple scribes involved mastering not only writing systems but also the mathematical concepts necessary for economic administration. Young scribes learned to calculate areas of agricultural fields, compute tax obligations, and track the complex relationships between different forms of payment and tribute. The Moscow mathematical papers and similar texts demonstrate the sophisticated mathematical knowledge required for temple economic management, from calculating the volume of granaries to determining the optimal allocation of resources across multiple temple enterprises. The relationship between temple scribes and royal administrative systems created both cooperation and tension. While temple scribes maintained their own records and procedures, they also needed to coordinate with royal officials who monitored temple economic activities. This due a loyalty required diplomatic skills and careful documentation, as scribes worked to satisfy both religious superiors and secular authorities. The gentle negotiations that took place in temple offices, conducted in the formal language of administrative correspondence, reflected the complex political realities of ancient Egyptian society. As political circumstances changed throughout Egyptian history, temple scribal systems demonstrated remarkable adaptability while maintaining core functions. During the Amarna period, when traditional religious practices were disrupted, temple scribes preserved essential economic records that allowed for the restoration of temple economics under later rulers. Under Pharaoh rule during the late period, these same scribal traditions adapted to new administrative requirements while maintaining their fundamental role in temple economic life. The persistence of hieroglyphic record minus keeping alongside new administrative languages demonstrated the enduring importance of traditional scribal culture in maintaining institutional continuity. The legacy of temple scribal systems extended far beyond their immediate economic functions, creating educational institutions that preserved and transmitted Egyptian cultural knowledge across generations. In the quiet hours of dawn and dusk, when temple scriptry a mess filled with the soft sounds of learning, these institutions maintained the intellectual foundations that supported not only temple economics, but Egyptian civilization itself. The sacred calendar of ancient Egypt moved with the gentle precision of celestial mechanics, each festival marking not merely a religious observance, but a complex economic undertaking that drew together the scattered threads of temple life into moments of concentrated activity. As the seasons turned and the Nile followed its eternal rhythm of flood and recession, the temples prepared for celebrations that would transform quiet courtyards into bustling centers of production, their stone walls echoing with the sounds of preparation that had remained unchanged for millennia. The approach of a major festival like the Opet celebration at Karnak Temple created ripples of economic activity that spread far beyond the sacred precincts. Months before the procession would carry the sacred bark of Ammon through the streets of Thebes, temple administrators began their careful calculations. Scribes working by oil lamp light tallied the requirements: thousands of loaves of bread, countless jars of beer, fine linen for the gods' clothing, precious oils for anointing, and the myriad small offerings that would be distributed to the crowds. The economic planning required for such events revealed the sophisticated understanding that temple administrators possessed of resource allocation and seasonal production cycles. In the temple workshops, the rhythm of preparation gradually intensified as festival dates approached. Bakers worked through the night, their ovens glowing like small suns in the darkness, producing the special breads that would be offered to the gods and later distributed to the faithful. The aroma of baking bread mingled with the scent of brewing beer as temple brewers prepared vast quantities of the sacred beverage that served both as offering and sustenance. These were not simple productions, but carefully orchestrated processes that required the coordination of multiple craft specialties, each contributing their expertise to the festival's success. The textile workshops hummed with particular intensity during festival preparations. Weavers worked at their looms, creating the fine linen garments that would clothe the divine statues, their fingers moving with practiced precision as they produced cloth of a quality that would be worthy of the gods. The soft click of loom weights and the gentle whisper of thread being drawn through the warp created a meditative soundscape that accompanied the sacred work. These textiles represented not merely craft production, but economic investments of considerable value, their creation requiring skilled labor and precious materials that demonstrated the temple's commitment to honoring the divine. The festival economy extended far beyond the temple walls, creating temporary markets and commercial opportunities that drew merchants and craftsmen from distant regions. As the celebration approached, the areas surrounding the temple complex transformed into bustling marketplaces where vendors offered everything from simple food to elaborate crafts. Local farmers brought their finest produce, knowing that festival crowds would provide eager customers for their goods. The economic impact of these gatherings rippled through the entire regional economy, creating prosperity that extended far beyond the immediate participants. The processions themselves represented massive logistical undertakings that required careful economic planning. The sacred barcases that carried the gods through the streets were marvels of craftsmanship, their golden surfaces gleaming in the sunlight, but they also represented enormous economic investments. The precious metals, fine woods, and skilled labor required for their construction and maintenance constituted a significant portion of the temple's annual budget. The priests who carried these sacred objects wore elaborate costumes and jewelry that had been produced in temple workshops over many months, each piece representing hours of skilled labor and valuable materials. During the festivals, the normal economic rhythms of the temple were temporarily suspended as all activities focused on the celebration. The careful accounting that usually governed temple operations gave way to the generous distribution of goods to the crowds. Bread, beer, and other provisions were distributed freely, creating moments of abundance that reinforced the temple's role as a source of divine blessing. These distributions represented significant economic sacrifices as temples gave away goods that had required months of labor to produce, yet they also served to strengthen the bonds between the religious institution and the surrounding community. The seasonal nature of Egyptian festivals created a complex economic calendar that temple administrators had to navigate with skill and foresight. The timing of celebrations often coincided with agricultural cycles, creating periods of intense activity followed by quieter times of preparation and recovery. The harvest festivals, in particular, required careful coordination between the temple's agricultural estates and its craft production facilities, as the abundance of the fields had to be transformed into the elaborate offerings that would grace the altars. Foreign visitors to these festivals often marveled at the economic sophistication they witnessed, recording their observations in accounts that provide valuable insights into temple festival economics. Greek and Roman writers described the elaborate processions and generous distributions with wonder, noting the careful organization that made such events possible. These outside perspectives reveal how temple festival economics serve not only religious purposes, but also diplomatic and cultural functions, demonstrating Egyptian prosperity and organizational capability to international audiences. The legacy of these festival economies extended far beyond their immediate economic impact, creating traditions of community celebration and resource sharing that would influence Egyptian society for centuries. The careful balance between religious devotion and economic practicality that characterized temple festival planning represented a sophisticated understanding of how spiritual and material needs could be integrated into sustainable systems of celebration and renewal. The gentle lapping of Nile waters against temple docks carried more than the rhythm of seasonal floods. It brought the whispered promises of distant lands and the soft rustle of exotic goods that would transform Egyptian temple courtyards into quiet crossroads of ancient commerce. In the pre-minus dawn darkness, before the first prayers echoed through limestone corridors, Temple administrators would often walk to their storerooms, breathing in the mingled scents of frankincense from Punt, cedar from Lebanon, and silver from Anatolia, each aroma telling stories of trade networks that stretched far beyond the familiar boundaries of the two lands. The transformation of temples into centers of international commerce emerged gradually, like the slow accumulation of silt that enriched the Nile's banks. What began as simple exchanges of local surplus grain for pottery, textiles for tools evolved into sophisticated networks that connected Egyptian temple economies to the broader rhythms of ancient world trade. Temple administrators, trained in the careful measurement of harvests and the precise calculation of offerings, found their skills perfectly suited to the delicate negotiations required for long-distance commerce. The same scribes who recorded daily bread distributions could equally well document the arrival of cedar logs or the careful weighing of gold dust, their reed pens moving with practiced efficiency across papyrus surfaces that preserved these commercial relationships for millennia. The physical evidence of these connections manifested in the quiet corners of temple complexes, where foreign goods accumulated like sediment in a peaceful pool. In the storerooms of Karnak, archaeologists have uncovered ivory from Nubia, carefully carved and stored alongside local limestone sculptures. The temple workshops at Memphis revealed tools made from imported copper, their surfaces bearing the subtle marks of foreign metallurgical techniques that had been adapted to Egyptian religious requirements. These objects spoke not of dramatic conquests or heroic expeditions, but of patient relationships built through seasons of careful exchange, trust accumulated like the slow growth of temple endowments. The rhythm of international temple trade followed patterns as predictable as the Nile's annual flood, yet infinitely more complex in their human dimensions. Caravans would arrive at temple gates during specific seasons, their timing coordinated with agricultural cycles and religious festivals. The soft sound of camel bells and the creaking of wooden cart wheels became familiar music in temple courtyards, announcing the arrival of merchants who had traveled for months through desert routes or sailed across Mediterranean waters. Temple officials would emerge from their administrative chambers not with the urgency of military commanders, but with the measured pace of experienced negotiators who understood that successful commerce required patience, respect, and careful attention to the subtle protocols that governed international relationships. The goods themselves told stories of remarkable human ingenuity and cultural exchange. Frankincense and myrrh, essential for temple rituals, arrived from the mysterious land of Punt through trading relationships that spanned centuries. Temple records describe the careful inspection of these precious resins, their quality assessed not only for commercial value, but for their suitability in sacred ceremonies. The aromatic smoke that rose from temple altars carried within it the essence of distant mountains and foreign skills, creating a sensory bridge between Egyptian religious practices and the broader world of ancient spirituality. Cedar wood from Lebanese forests found its way into temple workshops, where skilled craftsmen adapted foreign materials to Egyptian aesthetic and religious requirements. The soft sound of saws cutting through aromatic wood mingled with traditional Egyptian craft techniques, creating furniture and architectural elements that embodied both local traditions and international connections. Temple administrators carefully recorded these transactions, noting not only quantities and prices, but the relationships with specific foreign suppliers, building networks of trust that could survive political upheavals and seasonal disruptions. The integration of international trade with temple economics created fascinating paradoxes that revealed the complexity of ancient commercial relationships. While temples maintained their identity as centers of Egyptian religious life, they simultaneously served as bridges between local communities and distant cultures. Foreign merchants, arriving with goods needed for temple ceremonies, found themselves participating in religious festivals and seasonal celebrations, their commercial activities becoming intertwined with Egyptian spiritual practices. The boundaries between sacred and secular, local and foreign, gradually blurred in the quiet spaces where temple administrators conducted their daily business. Silver from Anatolia and gold from Nubia accumulated in temple treasuries, their weight carefully recorded by scribes who understood that these precious metals represented more than mere wealth. They embodied relationships with distant peoples and the successful navigation of complex trade routes. The soft clink of metal being weighed in temple courtyards marked moments of connection across vast distances, each transaction representing months of travel, negotiation, and mutual accommodation. Temple officials developed sophisticated systems for assessing purity and value, their expertise becoming essential for the broader Egyptian economy's integration with international markets. The human stories embedded within these commercial relationships revealed the patient work of building trust across cultural boundaries. Temple administrators often maintained correspondence with foreign suppliers, their letters preserved on papyrus revealing personal relationships that transcended mere business transactions. These documents speak of inquiries about families, concerns about seasonal conditions, and the gradual development of mutual understanding that made long-distance commerce possible. The formal language of commercial agreements softened into expressions of genuine friendship, creating networks of human connection that sustained trade relationships through political changes and economic uncertainties. As centuries passed, these international connections transformed not only temple economics but Egyptian culture itself. For an artistic techniques influenced temple decoration, international architectural styles appeared in religious buildings, and exotic foods became incorporated into festival celebrations. The quiet accumulation of foreign influences filtered through temple commercial activities created a gradual cultural synthesis that enriched Egyptian civilization while maintaining its distinctive character. Temple courtyards became spaces where different worlds met and merged, their limestone walls witnessing the slow dance of cultural exchange that characterized ancient international relations. The legacy of temple international trade extended far beyond immediate commercial benefits, creating foundations for diplomatic relationships and cultural understanding that would influence Egyptian civilization for millennia. The patient work of temple administrators in building and maintaining these networks demonstrated the power of consistent, respectful engagement with foreign cultures, offering lessons in international cooperation that remain relevant across the centuries that separate us from these ancient commercial pioneers. As we reach the gentle conclusion of our journey through the temple economies of ancient Egypt, we find ourselves standing in the quiet twilight of understanding where the sacred and the practical merge into one harmonious whole. The limestone walls that witnessed countless seasons of planting and harvest, taxation and craft production, seem to whisper their ancient wisdom across the millennia, reminding us that human economic life has always been woven through with threads and meaning deeper than mere survival. In these temple precincts, we have discovered not merely administrative systems, but entire worlds where the rhythm of the Nile's flood became the heartbeat of institutional life, where the gentle scratch of reed pens on papyrus recorded not just transactions but the careful stewardship of divine gifts. The scribes who worked by oil lamplight, the craftsmen whose hammers rang in sacred workshops, the farmers who brought their grain to temple granaries all participated in an economic system that understood commerce as a form of devotion and devotion as a practical necessity. The contradictions we have explored between temple and royal authority, between local needs and institutional demands, between tradition and adaptation reflect the eternal human challenge of balancing competing goods within limited resources. Yet in the patient endurance of these temple systems across 3 millennia, we glimpse something profound about human economic organization, its capacity to create stability through flexibility, to maintain continuity through change, to serve both material needs and spiritual aspirations. As the shadows lengthen across these ancient courtyards, we can almost hear the evening prayers mixing with the soft sounds of workshops closing, the gentle lowing of cattle returning from temple fields, the rustle of papyrus scrolls being carefully stored in archive chambers. These sounds fade now into the peaceful silence of deep historical understanding, where knowledge becomes not burden but blessing, not complexity but clarity. Let your mind rest now in the cool shadows of these temple columns, where the weight of centuries dissolves into the lightness of comprehension. The economic systems we have explored continue their ancient work in the realm of memory, their seasonal rhythms matching the natural cadence of breath and heartbeat. In this space of profound peace, where the sacred and the practical become one, allow yourself to drift into the gentle embrace of sleep, carried by the eternal wisdom of those who understood that all true economy is, at its heart, an act of care for the human community. The temple walls hold their ancient secrets safely now, as sleep holds you.